We're back on day 3 and it's time to get this thing wrapped up. We're gonna try to build a knee wall on top of this existing brick here to help support the ceiling joist and give some center support to the rafters as well. These are very long 2x10 rafters. They span about 24 feet, which is way too long for a 2x10 joist or rafter. So we're gonna give it some support at about 16 foot, install a ledger against it for the ceiling joist, and after the ceiling joists are installed, it's off to the rafters. Once we get those rafters framed in, hopefully we can sheet that roof, plywood these gables, and it'll go a long ways to being ready to install the shingles and make this house waterproof. So let's get at it and make it happen, Captain. Look, I got one black sock and one white sock.
Yeah.
This is what they were wrapped together. Matters is they're clean. I'm hoping that's what matters. I'm gonna put a 4-foot 2x4 up right here on the very end and a 6.5-inch block in there representing the plumb cut on the rafter to see about where I would finish out at up here on the roof. I want to make sure that this roof is not going to finish out higher than the existing house, but I do want to maximize the amount of pitch I can get. I want to make sure that we don't exceed our 24-foot rafter length. We get as much pitch as we could possibly get, and these blocks are going to show that. When I tack one over there and the 4-foot over here, we'll run a string line and we can start pulling some measurements and see about where we finish at. We got 2 doors. This is going to be one to enter from the deck, and then we're going to put one there on the outside so you can leave to the backyard. To figure out our roof pitch, there's 2 factors that are really very important in deciding, you know, how high or how low our roof is going to be. One is we don't want our new porch roof to be higher than the existing roof, but most importantly, we have to have at least a 312 pitch on our new roof to shed that water off properly. And how you figure that, you know, approximately without getting an exact measurement on your rafter, is a 312 pitch climbs 3 inches for every foot in length. So we know that we have a 16-foot beam here. So if you would just multiply 3 inches times the 16-foot length, because every 1 foot we climb 3 inches. So 3 times 16 is 48 inches, which allowed me to make this 48-inch cut on the 2x4. Now the 6.5-inch block that Derek was holding out there on the outside of the beam is representing the plumb cut or the width of our 2x10 rafter, because you can't put the string directly to the beam, because then you wouldn't be allowing for that cut, and that would drastically change the pitch if you just tried to pre-measure down to the corner of the beam where the bird's mouth sits versus the actual top side of the rafter, and let that kind of plane out, and you'll get a true reading as far as what the exact pitch is. Now we ran a string line from that 6.5-inch block and let it run beside our board here to about where our 24-foot length was. And we only came out with a 212 pitch, which is really too shallow for shingles. It could cause water to sit up there and freeze, or just sit up there and just settle on nail heads, which over time could cause leaks, and we just don't want that to happen. A lot of times when water freezes throughout the winter, when it goes to melt, it'll actually push the water up before it's allowed to run back down. It's just a natural process of thawing, which is really weird. You know, you would think that it would just drain from the bottom, but it doesn't. It actually pushes up. So if you had a large sheet of ice on your shingles, it could technically push that up underneath that piece before it's allowed to come back down, and it might even be able to reach a dangerous point where it would be past the protected area and be able to get in behind the shingles. So it's really important that we have a decent pitch out here and we get that water running off and no sitting on any areas throughout the new structure. Whew, that's way up the roof too. And I still got to go down another 9.5, 9.25 plus 1.5 inches. Oh my goodness. So what I'm trying to figure out with this here is just maximizing my height. Same thing we were talking about earlier. Trying to maximize my height as our rafters are going to rest on this wall. So depending on the height of the actual rafter itself, which is 2 by 10 in this case, which measures to 9.25 inches, plus our top plate for a grand total of 10.75. So when TJ holds the block out there, and I run the string like we just did a few seconds ago, it lets me know what angle we're at, and I went about as high as I could possibly go. We may just have to put some type of flat roofing on here instead of shingles. That is going to be a nice ledger right there, boys. Now with our ceiling joists, we want them to be, there is quite a bit of span, but we're only going to be holding a vinyl soffit ceiling, so there's not going to be that much weight directly on the ceiling. So we're going to use 2 by 8 by 16 foot long southern yellow pine, and we're going to put those on 16 inches on center. So one thing is real important that you guys must do, and this is true with your joists, your wall studs, your ceiling joists, and your rafters especially. You really need to look down the edge of that board and mark your crown. You'll be able to see up here some examples. It doesn't matter how you mark it or what you mark it with. I think the easiest thing to do is mark an arrow. Just so you, especially if you're a beginner, because then you kind of know exactly what that means, and that means this side needs to go up. And you kind of, every board has a natural crown to it or arc, just like a rainbow. So if you turn any board up on its edge and kind of just look right down that edge, you'll be able to see a natural hump on there. And over time, that crown or hump will level out. So we put all of our crowns up, because as gravity pulls on our materials, it'll come down to a nice level place. You know, what is the standard acceptable in the area or where we work is 1/4 inch of crown. If you're working with material that has over 1/4 inch of crown, you do not need to be using that piece of wood. You can just send that back to the manufacturer, you get fully reimbursed. Also, the number one thing, I can work with some crowns, but what we cannot work with is twists. So if one board at the end is twisted this way and the other side is twisted this way, it's not gonna make for a good finish. It's gonna make it really tough on your siding contractors, on your sheetrock finishers. So if you have more than a 1/4 inch of crown, I would suggest that you send it back. So it's a good idea to kind of pick your own lumber. If you're getting lumber from a building supplier or anything like that, usually order about 10% extra of what you'll think you'll need, so you'll have a couple pieces to call through. You'll be able to send back and you won't have to go back running for materials. All right, I'm gonna nail that side off over there, guys, and I guess we can figure out some rafters. So I put one block down here on the bottom to make sure that our bottom's nice and straight. And I put one up here on the top so it doesn't get twisty when I pull on it, because I am gonna put a little bit of weight up there and I don't want it to get twisty on us and change my layout. So we're gonna leave 2 there for temporary until the rafters are on. I'm gonna go ahead and line a 2 by 4 up on top of these ceiling joists to make sure they stay perfectly straight. The beam is straight. It is now rafter time. So to check the crown, you want to stand that board up on its edge. And may be a little hard to see, but if you can look down the edge of that board, it has a small arc to it. And that's the side that we want to go up. And when we come to this edge here, we'll just mark an arrow just like that so we know that this side needs to go up. And we'll lay these rafters all the same direction with crowns going this one direction so that when we mark our pattern, we won't be having to flip our pattern back and forth, back and forth. We can just slide it right on over, mark our cuts, and then move on to the next one. We put our string lines up earlier with our 6.5 inch block outside. We kind of lined it up with our knee wall to kind of see where we were going to plane at and also what our pitch was going to be. And we're working with roughly a 2.5 12, which is almost 14 degrees. We're really, really close to 14 degrees. So what I did was, our rafters are extra long, a little bit more than we need, not enough to make it to the roof, but enough to make it to the knee wall. We just put a tail pattern down here, and I will slide my square to a 14-degree angle, mark down that, as we did here, all the way across the board. Now, the 2x10 rafter is about 9.25 inches long, but when you have it on an angle, we're actually a little bit longer, somewhere around 9.5 inches. So we came down approximately 7.5 inches and marked a perpendicular line to our plumb cut. And this is what we will call our bird's mouth. And this will create a little seat area where it'll lock into the beam, give us a nice place to nail to, while also allowing each rafter to hit the beam at the same exact place, at the same exact height. So we'll have one consistent measurement in height over the beam area and around our tails. Now that'll again work the same way at the top of our knee wall, as these 2x10s will rest completely on the knee wall. And we've strung lined that as well as far as height, and added a couple shim blocks to make sure that that plate was perfectly straight as well, so there's no real waves in our roof. You know, there's always going to be a little bit of inconsistency, whether it's an eighth or so, but like we said, as far as the ceiling joists, same thing with the rafters. You really do not want to have bigger than a 1/4 inch variance in anything, because it will start getting noticeable to the eye. Things don't have to be perfect to look really well, but if you get over a 1/4 inch variance, you will start to notice things, and it will not look good at the end product. So our fascia overhang we did was approximately 1 foot long. So once I had my bird's mouth, and this area here will be removed, I came over and marked 1 foot, and then from that same point, which was down here, we just put our square on the same degree as the portion above, and we slid over until we hit that mark. Once we hit that mark, we can just square that up. Now we're planning on using a 1x6 for our fascia, hence the reason we stopped at 5.5 inches. Now once we are at 5.5 inches, I will square that back over and we'll remove that as well. So when we put our 1x6 fascia on, we completely cover the rafter tail end, and it'll allow us to metal and cover up all the raw wood and not leave it exposed to the elements. So we'll make this cut here on the copy. So we'll have something to do just that, copy onto each rafter. So let's see, when we make this cut, it's really important to have your saw blades about 1/8 of an inch wide. And if, depending on which side of the line or directly in the middle of the line that you cut, you need to cut all your rafters the same way. And I like to put my blade on the outside of what's trash. So wherever my line is, I kind of want to see my blade leaving a little bit of that pencil on the board that we're going to use, so that I know that I have a true measurement. If your blade gets on the other side, you can lose up to 1/8 of an inch just that quickly. But by the time you do that onto your rafters, and if you continue that pattern over and over and over again, you could lose up to a 1/4 inch and have a big variance in your rafters. So real important to pay attention to your cuts on these rafter cuts, and leave that little bit of the pencil line so that you know you're getting a true measurement and cutting it at the same place each and every rafter. Have that saw guide directly flat onto the 2x10. You don't want to get it like this or even like that. It just creates a natural bevel that's not consistent, and another imperfection and thing that can get worse and worse and affect our overall look on the outside of the rafter tails. And cut slow. When we do any of our roof overs or frame overs onto an existing roof, I really like to remove all the shingles that are underneath my framing. It's not super necessary. You can just frame right over top of it, but with my sleeper, and it's relatively similar to a ledger board, and rafters, I'd like to have those as close to wood on wood contact as possible. So I pulled a measurement down here at the bottom, which is 19.25 feet. It's exactly flush with the end of my framing and my gable wall, with about a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch of play there, so that the roofers can come in and install the proper step flashing. So I'm going to go up at the top and mark that same exact number, set a nail down here at the bottom, hook my string line on that, and pop a line straight up the roof so that I can ensure that we have a nice straight square gable end here. And we're going to pull the overall measurement from this line once this line is popped, and we'll know exactly where the shingles are that need to be removed, and it will create a nice line for the roofer who, if had to cut it later, would probably have to work twice as hard to get that done. So we're going to pull that straight up here, and we're going to check this for square after we get both sides marked. If there's any adjustment that needs to be made, I'll do it now. One thing you can't do is rely on other framing and other building to be perfectly square. We noticed down here on the lower portion of the deck that even the porch stoop was out about 1 inch out of square and only 4 feet. So we'll pop our lines with our parallel dimensions, the same exact length, and then we'll pick a point and we'll check that square to see if we need to adjust it side to side. We're going to start our layout from the same side that we started our joist layout. We use the number 15.25 set ahead on the joist. So on the rafters, we're going to do 15.25 set back so that our rafter can sit directly on the beam and not interfere with the joist itself, and at the same time be right up against it so we can actually nail the rafter to the joist and create a strong connection point and obtain maximum amount of strength against storms and high winds. So we're going to lay this out completely on a 16-inch on center layout all the way across, so we know exactly where our rafters are going to sit. So while we are passing the rafters up, we will not have to pull our tape measure out and be fighting with layout. We'll be able to concentrate on properly nailing the rafters themselves and just make it a little easier while we have something heavy, the rafter and the framing gun, in our hands. So our 24-foot rafters wouldn't quite make what I wanted to get out of our pitch. So you guys saw us build our knee wall here in the middle, and now we've continued this gable end up here and nailed it right down to the roof. And this is made with about a 76-degree pitch. And we got that by putting the string on our 6.5-inch block, putting the string up here where it planed out, and literally putting our square on the roof, and where the string crossed is what our angle was. Now, the two gable ends, I've allowed them to nail directly to the roof. But in between that space, we're gonna put this 2x10 ledger up here so that the rafters will actually rest on that ledger and grab bearing from multiple joists at the same time, instead of having all of the pressure in one area that may or may not be directly in line with the rafters or trusses below. So this 2x10 sleeper will help transfer and distribute that weight in between the layouts of the roof below. Now you can see with this extraordinarily long cut, we will also need to put another sleeper down here towards the bottom edge of the cut, and we will do that in the form of two 2x4s or a 2x8. But they can get, some of this installed beforehand. You can see Freddie now is working his 16-inch layout. He's running that across there, and he doesn't need any explanation for that. He's got that pretty much well under control. That looks good, buddy. That looks good right there. So that you might notice that the 2x10s here past the knee wall are at different lengths. And we've done that because they move the pattern in the copying board up and down to avoid bad areas of the raw wood that we had cutting the joist out of, or rafters if you will. It does not matter the length of the overhang there. Ideally, the less overhang that you have in these situations is better. You typically want only about a 12 or 14 inch overhang of your wood past the knee wall, but 2 foot happens all the time. We do 2 foot cantilevers all the time. Just the rule is whatever distance sticks past your wall, you need to be double that distance back supported. So if we have 3 foot overhang, this portion here would need to be at least 6 foot long, which we're well above that. If this was a floor joist system, I would cut those off completely because we would want to avoid squeaks, but being that nobody's going to be walking on here, it'll be just fine. We're going to sister right beside them and nail both of them together. We're going to install hurricane clips here below to tie the rafters to the knee wall, and then the gables also nailed directly to the porch beam to create everything in a locking, nailed in tight pattern. Once this roof is plywooded, we can literally remove all the braces from the outside. Good thing is we got shingles coming in tomorrow. We got roofing paper getting in here today to get this thing watertight. Tomorrow the shingles get installed, and hopefully in the next couple days we'll get the porch stained, or at least on the exterior side, which is hidden by the screen portion. That way we can let it dry and cure for a couple days and then come back and install the screen. At that point, we're going to leave it open for a little while because our buddy here is an electrician and he's going to do all the wiring on this building himself. And once he gets done with getting the wiring done, we're going to be able to come in and install the vinyl siding on the inside of the unit. But we're getting close, boys. We've really made it through this deck install. They're really going to be pissed when they find out I wore slides on the roof. What in the world is this guy really telling us how to build a lean-to, and now a screened-in porch with slides on? There's no way he knows what he's doing, y'all.